Hi boys and girls. Today I want to do a video for you that's a review. I'm not going to teach you anything you don't already know, but we've been talking a lot about greatest common factors and least common multiples, and I think that these are two concepts that can easily get mixed up. For one reason, we often call greatest common factors GCF, and we call least common multiples LCM. So there's a couple of abbreviations there, each with 3 letters, and I think that can get confusing. Also, we are using both concepts to help us with fractions, and sometimes we use them incorrectly. And so I want to do a quick review to help you remember what the differences are and what we use each of them for. So I'm going to start with greatest common factor. And I start at the beginning, and I want to remind you that a factor is any number that's being multiplied to create a product. So when we talk about factors, we talk about pairs of factors, what two numbers can be multiplied to make a product. So I'm going to use the number 8, and I'm going to do the pairs of factors, and then we'll incorporate another number to help us find common factors. But I think it's always important that we step back and start at the very beginning of what we know, because it's a process to get to the end, and sometimes we like to jump to the end and we forget those important steps in between, and those important steps are really important. Okay, so if I take the number 8, I want to list all of the pairs of factors, so all of the numbers that can be multiplied together to make 8. Now remember, when we list our pairs of factors, we put them inside parentheses. So I start with 1, and 1 times 8 equals 8. And also 2 times 4 equals 8. There aren't any other factors that go into 8. If I want to go on and find a common factor with 8 and another number, I'm going to go ahead and pick the number 12. I would do the same thing. So I start with 1, 2 times 6, and then 3 times 4. So those are my pairs of factors. So the next thing to do is to list out your factors, and you want to put them in order. So we would do 1, 2, 4, and 8. And for 12, we would do 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12. I'm running out of room here. I scooted over so I have a little bit more space to work with here. So we've listed out our factors, put them in order. The next step is to figure out which ones they have in common, which factors are common. So we can see that 1 and 1, 2 and 2, and 4 and 4 are the factors that 8 and 12 have in common. The next step is to decide which one of those is the greatest common factor, and the biggest one, or greatest number, is 4. So the greatest common factor for 8 and 12 is 4. Now this is helpful for when we're wanting to reduce fractions. So if we had the fraction 8/12, the way to reduce that fraction would be to divide the top by 4 and the bottom by 4, and we would come up with 2/3. Okay, so that's your review of greatest common factors. Okay, so we're also going to talk about least common multiples. And just like when we talked about greatest common factors, it's always important to start at the beginning of what you know. So instead of just jumping to a least common multiple, we want to start with multiples, then common multiples, and then find the least common multiples. So I want to remind you that a multiple is the product of any number multiplied by another number. So we talked about skip counting. So when I skip count or count by 2s, I'm giving you the multiples of 2. So the multiples of 2 are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and so on. So I'm going to take the numbers 3 and 4, and we're going to find the least common multiple of 3 and 4, but we're going to start by skip counting, or writing out the multiples of 3 and 4, and then finding what they have in common. So the multiples of 3 and 4 of 3 are 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, and so on. The multiples of 4 are 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, and so on. So if we look at our lists here, we can see that both 3 and 4 have 12 in common as multiples. And they have more. If we kept going, we would find more. In fact, if we kept going by 3, we would get to 24. 18, 21, and then 24. So they have both of those in common. But 12 is the least common multiple of 3 and 4. And so that's how you find that. So I want to remind you too that the reason that we look for least common multiples is because eventually we're going to be making equivalent fractions opposite of reducing. So we're going to actually be making them bigger, and the way that we'll make them bigger is by finding common denominators based on what our least common multiple is. I'll tell you more about that next week. For your practice, I want you to do a couple of problems for me. First, I want you to find the greatest common factors for 4, 6, and 8. So you'll start with your pairs of factors for 4, your pairs of factors for 6, your pairs of factors for 8. Then you will list out those factors in order, and then you'll circle the greatest common factor. For least common multiples, I want you to find the least common multiple of 5 and 8. You'll start by skip counting or listing out the multiples. So I've started that here for you, 5, 10, 15, and keep going. You should probably have, like I said, 4 or 5 in your list before you start to move on. You'll do the same for 8, and then you'll circle that least common multiple. I should be able to clearly see this in your notes. I shouldn't have to ask you what your answer is. So make sure you make it obvious, or make a new label with your answer right next to it so I know what your answer is.